look at you with your professional background and degrees on the wall, and I see I'm humble bragging with Steve Finney up on the wall behind me.
That's pretty impressive. And by the way, please excuse the Yankee pictures in the background. My wife is a Yankee fan. I'm a Red Sox fan, so.
Yankees are a hallowed team in all of sports history, so no shame in that. It's so far away, I didn't even notice. I just noticed they were on the wall. I thought those were like your degrees or something, or you invented a drug or something. I didn't know what that was.
All right.
Well, guys, this is Brian O'Halloran. You might know him as the Ketogenic Pharmacist. And Brian and I have talked for a little while. I think I actually helped you come up with that little moniker for yourself. About a year or so ago you started that?
Yeah, just about. It was right during, it was in April, just about a year ago, coming up here. Yeah, it was right during the pandemic. And it was right after I got certified as a Certified Ketogenic Nutrition Specialist. I just took a class that was offered by Stephen Finney and Jeff Olick. It was a pretty intense class, and with exams and everything, and I passed. And I was sitting around with my wife, and I'm like, okay, I have this pretty cool like certification. What can I do with this? And it was on a Friday because I was listening to your Ask Me Anything. And I was listening, and you were talking about, business, learning about business. And I'm like, I gotta get in touch with Jimmy. And I got in touch with you. And then, by the way, I didn't think I was going to, because, you don't know me from a hole in the wall, but you were so kind and so nice. And I was able to, set up a time to talk, and it was great.
See, this is the beauty of the community that I don't think people recognize enough. They think, oh, well, Steve Finney, Jeff Folek, Jimmy Moore, Eric Westman, all these people are like, they won't ever reach back out. But the funny thing is, yeah, we're people too. Like, and we're all excited about the message. Like when I first started doing my podcasting, Brian, I thought the same thing, but I'm like, what the heck? What's the worst thing they can say? No, or no response. So I was like, okay. So I remember when I first started trying to get guests, it was the same way. I want to get a guest. I'm going to ask Gary Taubes. And guess what? The man said yes.
That's
Before
awesome.
I was even anything, he said yes. So good. Yeah. And obviously all of us just want to help. That's kind of a misconception is, well, we're all trying to do our own little thing. I've never seen myself as an island. I've seen myself as a conduit to lift others up.
And I'm very grateful for that, Jimmy. And it was one of those things where, like, I said to my wife, Mary, I'm like, I'm going to reach out to him. We'll see what happens. And I mean, you responded, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And then I talked to you. I'm like, I'm on the phone with Jimmy Moore. I'm like, okay, what's going on?
Well, again, the fun part is we're all people. And so we put pants on the same way, we sleep the same way. And we're bonded by nutrition of all things. I got to tell you though, Brian, the first time I heard you talk about what you wanted to be and who you are and what you do and background, your education background, your vocational background, I went, it sounds a bit like an oxymoron to be a ketogenic pharmacist. Now, I know you and I had these discussions. Can you talk about a little bit of how you got into pharmacology, why that was interesting to you, and like where your state of mind is now? Because one of the major themes in the keto world is we're trying to get people off drugs. And I know that's your heart too, even though you're a pharmacist. It's kind of a dichotomy there. Go.
Exactly. Yeah. So, when I started, I became a pharmacist I graduated in 2000. And, I thought it was my passion at the time. And, I was a retail pharmacist for about 10 years, working for a major chain, and, dispensing drugs. I thought that's what I was going to be doing for the rest of my life. And
Yeah.
it was one of those things where, people kept coming back for refills, and their doses were getting increased. They'd be in the hospital. Nobody was saying, hey, thank you for these medications, I'm now clear, now free, and I'm going to continue on with my life. I never got that, and I just kept getting people that come in that got worse, and it was sad. And not only that, retail setting in the pharmacy part, it wasn't pretty. It was not pretty at all. It was very stressful, and I was not happy, bottom line. And so after I got, I did 10 years at a retail, and then I got an opportunity to do something else with pharmacy, and it was more of a consulting job. So I'm able, at the time, and I still am. I'm still a consultant pharmacist, and I again help people manage their medications. But again, it's the same.
Can I stop you there? I have to ask the question that's the elephant in the room about pharmacies and pharmacists. When you go into a pharmacy and you drop off a request for a medication, why do you have to walk around the store for half an hour? I'm just dying to know.
Oh, well, I don't know if I walk around the store, but it is the whole atmosphere is, it's not a fun atmosphere to be in. And I haven't been in that atmosphere for a while. Maybe things have changed. I don't know. But I know that when I was there, it was everything had to be done everything had to be done at once. And you had to really prioritize, and that got a little challenging. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, but
I was just always curious, because when you go in, even if there's nobody in line and it doesn't seem like, I know there's people that call in ones and you got to drive through, but it just seems like there's nobody here. And I see it's right there. Go pick it up. Hand it to me. Like,
it's funny. We at the time I had a big ego. I'm like, oh, I need to check for this and that. I'm like, but after thinking about it, I'm like, I probably could have just taken it down and done that right away for the patient. And I may be speaking not well with the current retail pharmacist, but I probably could have done a little bit better with that. So I'll just say that.
The funny thing was when they put the urine ketone testing strips behind the pharmacy counter. I'm like, why?
I know.
What was that about? Like, anyway, sorry. I have lots of questions about pharmacy stuff. Dude,
yeah.
So how did you find keto besides?
So what happened is that when I met my future wife, it was back in 2011, and she was a runner, and I wanted to impress her, so I started running myself. I wasn't healthy, but I started running, and I also started getting injured as well. But my goal was to get to a half marathon, because that's my wife did the half marathons. I wanted to impress her, wanted to have something in common with her, because I kind of liked her. And so anyway, I started training for the marathon, for a half marathon. I was not eating well. I was getting injured. I did the half marathon, and I swore I would never do that again. I was so inflamed. I was eating like crap. It was just not a good situation, but I did it. My wife and I got married. I started becoming complacent, and I really just didn't eat well at all. And it came to a point where I was overweight, and I was at a store. I was at Banana Republic with my wife doing some clothes shopping. And I remember trying on a shirt. It was the largest shirt that they had, and it did not fit well. I looked at myself in the mirror, and it didn't fit well. And I said to the guy, I said, hey, can you grab me, a size larger from the back? And he said, I'm sorry, but that is the largest size that we have. And so it was at that point where I'm like, okay, something's got to change. I'm not sure what I need to do at this point, but this is not what I want to do. I'm not happy right now. And then I was driving to work one day. I was listening to podcasts. I happened to have a podcast on. It wasn't even a nutrition podcast. It was Adam and Dr. Drew. I remember, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he had on a guest. It was Vinny Tortorich,
Yeah.
and he was a very, and I didn't know who he was, and
Oh yeah.
what's that?
I said he's big time in podcasting.
He was, yeah, he is, and it was one of those things where I listened to him, and I'm like, okay, well, he's telling us the exact opposite what we've been taught in school, to eat less, move more, which obviously was not working for me because, not that I was really trying to do it, but it just, I listened to what he had to say. I'm like, okay, let me give this a shot, and I did, and I started losing weight, and then I started to go down that road where I started to hear other podcasts, Jason Fung, Gary Taubes, Nina Teicholz, and everybody else who I didn't mention. But and all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, this is actually something. And I ended up losing quite a bit of weight, and I never looked back.
There had to be a moment, though, in the midst of going through your keto journey where you're like, wait a minute. I have always believed, based on your training as a pharmacist and based on your own experience, although you were starting to notice higher and higher and higher drug amounts with your patients that were coming in, but it had to be very strange in your head. Wait a minute. I feel good and I'm not taking any medications at all. What in the world is this sweet magic of keto?
It's amazing. I mean, it was one of those things where I had the mental clarity. That's one thing that is not mentioned as much, but I mean, when you
I,
hear keto,
I say that all the time. If I got no other benefits, I love that I have a stabilized mood
oh,
and my brain is firing on all cylinders all the time.
there is nothing better than that. And I know when you hear keto, you think of weight loss. And yes, that does happen. But the other things that happen where your inflammation goes down and the mental clarity, I mean, like I am firing at all cylinders at all times. And I didn't realize back before keto, I was in a fog. I mean, looking back at it, I was in a constant fog. And I just thought that was a normal thing. But I mean, after, doing, following ketogenic, it's amazing.
That is so true. Like, how many things when you go keto, you think you're relatively healthy, other than maybe a little bit of weight. But then you go keto and things just start to go better. And you didn't even recognize them because you became so used to them over time that you thought it was normal. And plus, the doctor, I hate when doctors do this. It's pet peeve day for Jimmy Moore here on the show today. I hate when doctors say, well, you're getting older and so that stuff happens. Screw that. Like, when you get older, that doesn't mean your body's going to totally break down. Yes, you're getting older. Yes, things are not going to work the same way as they did in your 20s, but come on, like, it's not an inevitability that you're on a slow death march.
Exactly. And I'll tell you, I was heading down that wrong direction. I mean, just with my blood work, I remember, before I, adopted a ketogenic lifestyle, I remember going to get my regular blood work done. And I remember my A1C was 5.6. Now, looking at, I've never been diabetic, but the guy never mentioned anything about it, which I thought was kind of, because it didn't fit in that 5.7 to 6.4 range.
The problem is, thank you for mentioning that range. The problem is everything is subclinical. Who says 5.6 is normal? To me, if you're keto, you should be aiming for 5.0. Now, I know that's robust and that's really good, but it's like, isn't that what we want to aim for? People see the range and they think, oh, I'm in range, therefore I'm healthy. And they don't realize the range is based on other sick people that go see their doctor. So I don't want to be the best of the sick. I want to be maybe the worst of the not sick at worst.
Great point. Excellent point. And the thing is, like these numbers at you go to different labs and they have different ranges. Now, typically with A1C, it's 5.7 to 6.4. That's kind of a standard. But other blood work that you get done, the ranges differ. And there's never really a gold standard for a lot of the blood work. But I knew that 5.6, was not great. And my doctor never mentioned anything about diet. And it all comes down to that. And the type 2 diabetes, it all comes down to the diet.
Yeah. I'm
And
curious, Brian, as a pharmacist and educated in traditional pharmacology, was there any kind of nutrition training there, or was it solely on mechanistic things that the drugs are doing in the body?
it was drugs, 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 drugs. I mean, it was back in the, I just graduated right before the Ally. Remember that the Orlistat.
I did a whole episode where I kind of made fun of it because it orlistat makes you shit your pants, you guys. So if you've never seen it before, don't mess with that. Supposedly it doesn't let you digest fats, which to me is horrific to think about a drug that's like inhibiting the absorption of fat, especially with all the fat soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K. Like, how do you absorb those if you're crapping out your fat? Anyway, that's a whole nother story. But yeah, Ally. And so I did a whole episode, and my producer got cute and he put fart noises all through the episode. I could not stop laughing when I listened back to that one.
But that's what we're dealing with. That is exactly what we're dealing with. And then the phentermine and I graduated right after fen got taken off the market.
Yeah.
It was nothing about diet. It was about what kind of drugs can we give patients that are overweight.
And that's sad to me. But also, I'm assuming the pharmacological industry of teaching is much in the same way as the medical school teaching, heavily funded and influenced by the pharmaceutical companies.
Absolutely, everything is funded by them, and that's kind of, it's their way or the highway. And I mean, looking back at it, I'm like, okay, well, they're getting their funding from the pharmaceutical companies. This is what we're going to have to do. But you're making a deal with the devil. I mean, it's really unfortunate.
You know what would be really cool is if somehow you could become a holistic pharmacist where you have strategic drugs, because there are still some good drugs.
Sure.
I think overall metformin is a really good insulin modulating drug. If you're going to take, if I ever took any drug, I don't, but if I ever took any one, that would be the one. Now it comes with some risks as well, and you can talk about that, but I would love to see like a holistic pharmacist that has like high dose omega-3 fatty acids. They make those. That's not really drug in my eyes, but they make it pharmaceutical grade, and even like pharmaceutical grade of some of these other key vitamins and nutrients that you could then sell in that way. I don't know. I think there's a better way to be in the pharmacy industry than just pushing drugs indiscriminately.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of take that one step further, I really am heavily into eating. You can get what you need through food. I mean, it comes down to, I mean, yeah, I mean, supplements that definitely can help. I mean, that's for sure. But getting back to the basics, getting the sunlight for your vitamin D,
Yes.
eating the wild caught salmon, the grass fed beef, and take the money that you're spending on your medications, spending it on food. That's your medication. I want to really focus on that. I mean, that's there's something to be said about it.
Well, and food is medicine. I do like that phrase. I was on simulcasting over on Clubhouse, and I was on Clubhouse the other day, and somebody mentioned, I hate that phrase, food is medicine. I'm like, but it is. Like, look at all the ways the body can heal thyself, especially when you focus on real foods that nourish you, that give you adequate nutrients, that's diversified. Like, I feel like so much of what we thought we knew about nutrition and its impact on our health, we don't even know the just a smidge of what we think we should know.
Exactly. And then also too, when you're talking about ketogenic and being in the ketogenic world, unfortunately, we also have to tell and educate people to say that, when you go out shopping, buying a bunch of keto bars, it's not doing, that's not the right thing to do. And that I also want to, with my with my business of the ketogenic pharmacist, I want to educate people with that, knowing that, that we got to be focusing on real foods and not these packaged processed foods. And
yeah. Oh, and this happens with everything. Anytime that something becomes popular, everybody wants to monetize it. When I wrote Keto Clarity way back in the day, uh, there was no like keto anything because it wasn't a market. Well, now it's a huge market. And so companies take those things and they run with it. And so you're right. Like you can't trust those things, but that happens in every industry. Anytime there's money to be made, the shysters will come in and try to make a buck.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate, and that's what I'm trying to be the one to kind of steer people away from the big industries, including medications. I like to be like a de-prescribing pharmacist, where a lot of pharmacists are encouraging, oh, ask your doctor about this. I want to be the one like ask your doctor about getting off this.
Yes. Oh, and that's the thing too. So many people go on maintenance drugs or what they think are maintenance drugs. Oh, you're going to have to take this for the rest of your life. The only ones I know of that, and please add some more to this list, but if you're a type 1 diabetic, you will always have to take insulin. That's not a negotiable. Your pancreas doesn't make it anymore. That's
Right.
literally the definition of type 1 diabetes.
Right.
If you have hypothyroidism that's autoimmune from Hashimoto's and other kind of severe cases of hypothyroidism, you have to take desiccated pig thyroid for the rest of your life
Yep.
to regulate that. So I know some people do heal eventually, but for the most part, there are truly maintenance drugs. But there's people on statin medications as a maintenance drug. That was never intended to be that way, but people follow it. And this is the problem that a lot of pharmacists run into. Maybe you're educated like you are, but then the doctor prescribes it and the patient just obediently follows it. There needs to be some kind of an educational piece, maybe between the doctor and the pharmacist, that says, all right, I just want you to understand all the risks of what you're about to do taking this drug. Does that exist, that infrastructure?
Oh boy, I wish it did. That's it's so you touched a really big point with the statins. I mean, that statins are one of the job that I have now. We have to we are judged on certain metrics, and one of the metrics we have is if a patient has diabetes, they have to be on a statin. And not only they have to be on a statin, but they have to be adherent to that statin.
I
So,
talked to a guy on Clubhouse just yesterday. Sorry to interrupt, but it's salient to the point you just made. I talked to a guy on Clubhouse yesterday, and he was like, yeah, my doctor put me on a statin. I'm like, so I'm just curious, what was your total cholesterol? 137. And I was like, why did he put you on a statin? I don't know. He just told me I had to be on one. Then I asked the follow-up, are you type 2 diabetic? And he's like, oh, yeah, I'm that. And I'm just going, it's not even about lowering cholesterol anymore. It's like, let's make all these patients lemmings. And if you fit in this lemming box, you do the lemming answer. And like, that's not medicine.
no, no, it's not. And they're not thinking. They're just they're just treating what they've been told to treat. And it's unfortunate. The drug companies are saying, okay, well, we gotta make sure these people are on statins. And I remember there was an advertisement, and I don't have it with me right now, but there was an advertisement for Lipitor back when Lipitor was brand and when it came out,
Yeah.
and there was a picture of the the person on the thing on the advertisement, and
You froze for about 5 seconds. Back when Lipitor came out, pick up from there.
okay, when Lipitor came out, there was a picture of the person on the cover, and on the very bottom it said it lowered I guess they lowered the risk of heart attack from 3% to 2%.
Oh, no, no, no. It did more than that. It did more than that. It said lowers cholesterol by 40%. And so
Oh,
you're getting to a great point here. The great point is you're looking at this 40%. It's, oh my gosh, 40%. So talk about relative risk versus actual risk. Go.
yeah, that's correct. The 40%, I kind of jumped ahead of myself, but
Yeah.
yes, you're right. It was like a 40% reduction. Like, oh my gosh, this is great, but that's relative risk. But when you talk about absolute risk, it's 1%.
That's it. Like people are so fooled by these pharmaceutical ads, and I would love it if some pharmacists could take on the mantra of making YouTube videos where you do a breakdown of these ads. I would so love that, Brian, where you like show a pharmaceutical ad and like slow it down, blow up like all the fine print and say, okay, look at what it says here. This is what they're saying. Oh, look at the 40% number. This is what it actually means. Dude, you have no idea how that would
That
be.
is gold, and that is absolutely right. And it's funny too because I work with another pharmacist, and I said, I'm like, hey, come over here for a second. I showed her on my computer. I'm like, she just graduated relatively recently, so she's like, fresh out of school. I'm like, have you seen this? And her eyes widen open. She's like, no, and I'm like, well, this is what was published. This is. No, she had no idea, and I didn't have any idea until I did some digging. But I mean, that's not talked about.
Yeah, and then on the cholesterol front, I remember last year, I didn't watch a lot of TV last year, but before the big bad virus hit the world, I was watching some sports, and I remember there was an ad for a new cholesterol medication, and then they started off the ad, Brian, with, when statins aren't enough, take this new drug with the statin. So it's like, now that statins can't be made into $29 billion a year in annual profits, let's create a new drug that then goes along with the old drug that we made a lot of money off of because it's going to enhance the benefit. And it's just like, when does the madness stop?
Jimmy, I'm shaking my head right now. Not only that, I mean, kind of to build on top of that, you'll get something that goes off patent, so that brand name becomes a generic. But that brand, the company that made that brand name, will keep the same drug but make it an XR version.
Tweak it. They'll
tweak it, yeah, an extended release version, and it's already once a day medicine. Okay, so I mean, what are we doing? What are we doing?
I'm surprised they never did Lipitor Plus and put CoQ10 in it and said it was a new drug.
That might happen, by the way. So exactly.
Don't give them any ideas, right?
I know. So.
Oh man, I could talk to you about so many things that are frustrating about the pharmaceutical industry, and I'm sure you share those same frustrations. So
I was going to say one more thing too, Jimmy. Yeah. We every so often where I work, we have a day where the drug reps would come in to it would be more like an educational session, and they talk about their particular product and about what's coming in the pipeline. And there was one particular company that came in to do their talk, and it was about diabetes, and the guy was sipping on a Diet Coke. Nothing about diet, and I kind of asked him, like, what about diet? I just kind of generally asked him about that, and he's like, oh yeah, that's important, but this particular medication, it does this reduction, this and that, and just completely just went over the whole diet part of it.
Yeah.
And then he came back another year, and I asked him, and I said, well, what do you think about Sarah Hallberg and what the wonderful things that she's doing over at Virta Health? He's like, Virta what? I'm like, right. Okay, this is pointless to be talking about it, because right. my colleagues are sitting around like, what are you talking about? They don't know. And the drug company representative, that he's not going to talk about that because he wants to promote his drug. It was a very weird situation, and I'm like, I gotta get it. This is something I don't want to be doing. This is not right.
You sometimes feel like you're living in the twilight zone, that you're in a whole nother world from the rest of your colleagues, and going, how do you not see this? It's so clear to me.
Yep. It's one of those things where once you go down that rabbit hole, you can't unring that bell. It's like, this is something that it will always be with me now, and I know that this works.
So it took going into a store and not having the biggest shirt in the room fit you to get you to wake up. How do you wake up your colleagues? What is compelling to a pharmacist or even any medical professional at this point, what's compelling to them besides, I mean, even science? You mentioned Veer to Health. If they don't even know the science that's coming out, how do you even possibly try to reach them that way? So what would reach them?
Well, that is, that is a very good question. I mean, this is something that it's a monumental task, in my opinion. We just had to, lead by example. With my colleagues, when it comes to, we have people bring in their donuts and this and that, and they're like, oh, how come you don't have a donut? I'm like, well, let me know how you feel, a couple hours after that donut, and I wouldn't do that because that's, kind of a.
But again, you don't know how bad you feel until you give up the donuts, get keto adapted, feel better, and you go, whoa, this is what, like, everybody makes an excuse. Well, I'm X age now, and so therefore this is how you're supposed to feel. And so I just hate that kind of cultural thing that we do of excusing our bad habits and behaviors simply because everybody else deals with the bad habits and behaviors that then led them to feel the exact same way. So therefore it's an inevitability. I don't know, why don't people pursue better?
I don't think it's been, I don't know if they know what better is.
Right. Right.
And that's.
It's one reason I love the exogenous ketones, because if nothing else, it gives you a flash in the pan of what better could feel like, even in a moment. I'm not a fan of them just willy-nilly, but in the case of letting people feel, especially the ketone esters. Have you ever done the ketone esters that are really?
I have not, but I've heard about them. I've heard about them, but I think they can definitely help people. And it's a weird, if they don't follow, I don't know, you put your body in a weird metabolic state, because if you don't cut down your carbs and you increase your ketones, it's a very strange, and I don't know what the results. I mean, it's a kind of a bizarre, and I don't know anything. I'm not sure really what's going to happen with that.
Yeah, so there is a concern, especially with the esters, which are like exogenous ketones on acid, like 10 times more potent. I've done both, by the way, and I notice blood sugar does get driven down, but there is a concern if you already have high blood sugar and then you take this big bolus of a ketone ester, especially because they can shoot pretty high pretty fast. I went from 0.8 to 5.7 on the blood ketones within a half an hour. Yeah, you feel that. I felt like my hair was on fire. It was like wicked, dude. But I wanted to know what it felt like. And yeah, I could see people maybe getting concerned about ketoacidosis at that point if they already have high blood sugar and it's not going to come down quick enough.
Yeah, that's right. And also too, we also have to be concerned, even with medications too, and that's where I come in. There's a class of medications that if you are on it, that, and if you are, if you do a ketogenic lifestyle without taking, being mindful of that medication, that can put you in ketoacidosis, and that can be a problem. So it's one of those things where we have to. That's where I come in as a pharmacist to help get people off the medication safely, because if you don't have that drug knowledge, you can get yourself into a lot of trouble. And not just with that class of medications, but I'm also talking about, like, even with blood pressure, blood sugar, anything. If you don't take into account that the medication you're taking, you can get yourself into a lot of trouble if you go down that ketogenic road.
Yes. Yes, which is why anyone with type 2 diabetes who's heavily medicated and or on insulin, don't you dare go willy-nilly on keto. It's like a drug in its metabolic effects. I remember Dr. Westman telling me that he had one patient that he put basically on 20 grams of carbs, and overnight went from 200 units of insulin to 0. Like, can you imagine the hypoglycemic episode that patient would have had if they injected themselves with the 200 units?
Yeah,
they'd be dead today.
Yep. Absolutely. And that is out. I mean, just that one patient that you just mentioned, that should wake up so many people, be like, okay, I can get off these medications. I don't have to be on these. I can do this with diet. And people who are on insulin, they're not happy. I mean, I've never had anybody say to me, "Oh, well, I feel great on insulin." Everybody feels like crap on insulin, and
Yeah.
it's like this can be fixed if we go down this road instead. Unfortunately, we've got a lot of doctors out there that don't know about it, and they think it's a bad thing about, they misconstrued, ketosis with ketoacidosis. They're not educated. They're going against what, they've got standards too to follow as far as their metrics. Gosh, Jimmy,
Dude, I share in your exasperation. I go many a days with what I do, but it's a little bit of job security right now because I have lots to talk about still. But isn't it funny? Like drugs are kind of promoted as the modality to health, and yet real food is vilified as the worst thing you could possibly do for your health. Like when did we become bass backwards?
Exactly. And I was just thinking, one of the patients that I had this past Friday and was working, he had diabetes type 2, and last time I talked to him, his A1C was 8.0, not good. And I talked to him a couple months, which was on Friday. Like 4 months since the last time I talked to him. His A1C went up to 9.4. It's going the wrong direction. And I said, okay, what did the doctor talk to you about? And he's like, oh, well, he just boosted up my Toujeo to, I'm like, oh, what are we doing? And I'm like, I said, okay, what was your fasting sugar reading this morning? He's like, oh, 200 something. I'm like, what'd you have to eat last night? Well, I had a piece of cherry pie before I went to bed. I'm like, okay, what are
Yeah.
we doing? I mean, what?
Yeah.
It's sad. It's really sad. And the thing is, like, I'm not helping. If I don't do what I'm doing right now, I feel like I'm not helping people. And that's, I went to pharmacy school to help people, and this is not helping anybody. And so I'm in a very weird situation right now with work because I feel like I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Well, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing because you've rebranded yourself as the ketogenic pharmacist, trying to
Right.
teach patients that there is a better way. It kind of cuts into profitability as a pharmacist, but you're not interested in that. You got in it to help people and have them be healthy. I'll tell you something I've done, by the way, for 1 year now. As of the recording of this, we've been right at a year with this global pandemic. From day one, you'd be proud of me because I was ahead of the curve on what the science eventually showed. Day one, it was still winter. I started taking 25 to 30,000 IU of vitamin D3 gel caps a day. I just took it as a prophylactic. I'm like, I know it's going to help. It can't hurt.
No.
And started doing that. And then during the summer, I backed down to about 15 to 20, and then being in the sunshine copiously. And then once it went back to winter again, I went back up to the 25 to 30. So
Yeah.
I haven't had any problems with that. I haven't gotten the virus yet. And I don't worry about my immune health because I think that vitamin D, and there's a lot of studies that have come out showing how magical it is. Like, I feel like if we had that kind of information promoted to patients, other than, I mean, I know hydroxychloroquine got in the news pretty big last year and then it got silenced. I definitely want to hear what you think about that. But it's like, it's amazing to me. So many of the drugs and the interactions that you learned about in pharmacy school could actually be fixed with some nutrient sufficiency of these vitamins and minerals that are kind of the root cause why people are having the issues they're having.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it was in Spain, there was a hospital ward, and I don't know exactly where in Spain this was, but the people who were sick, what they were doing is they were wheeling out the beds outside so the patient can get the vitamin D
And the fresh air.
in the fresh air. I mean, this has never been mentioned in the media at all. And we're talking about double masking, and we're talking about, and by the way, my colleagues are all for what. And again, I hate to be speaking of, bad about, I don't want to be silenced by the media, but we're not looking at the root cause here, and we're not looking at what we can do, like you just said about, increasing your vitamin D, getting that sunshine, getting that fresh air. And it's unfortunate because that is, if you, and also metabolic health. I mean, my goodness, you improve your metabolic health. We're not going to have to worry if everybody improved their metabolic health. We wouldn't have to be worrying about getting their vaccines and getting the 2 shots and then getting a booster shot and again and maybe Divock, I was going to say 91, but 92 Divock. Who
Yeah.
knows what's going to happen down the road if there's going to be another virus that comes out. But we got to stop this now so we don't have to worry about that in the future.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to train you on how to do the little code. So O2 Divock, is that what you're referring to? or 1-2 Divock?
Well, 91 Divock is now, right? So it'd be 92 Divock. So 10 years from now?
Well, reverse the numbers, and that's where I got it from. So then it would be 1-2 Divock. People playing along at home do it backwards, and that's what it is. So yeah. So hydroxychloroquine, can we camp out there a second? Have you ever seen the politicization of a drug in all of your life?
No. It's really I'm in a really weird bad situation where all of my colleagues and also the articles that I read in terms of the pharmacy world, that's all against hydroxychloroquine. But we had somebody that was talking that was, that we had a bunch of physicians that said that, hey, this can work. It's unfortunate because it definitely has a place in certain situations.
Well,
but the media.
And the funny thing is, they act like drugs have never been repurposed for other uses other than the stated purpose. Like hydroxychloroquine is a malaria drug. So it's like, all right, well, that's a very small market. But then if it's a prophylactic or in the early days of getting 9-1 Divock, it can be helpful. Why wouldn't you use an existing drug rather than waiting for a jab in the arm that may or may not be helpful?
Right, exactly. So, I mean, it's unfortunate that we had to be in that situation. I think that kind of put us at a disadvantage for certain population.
Right.
But I think, putting that aside, I wish the media would focus on metabolic health. I mean, that just comes down to that. And and by the way, metabolic health, it's not just weight loss. I mean, that's part of it, but metabolic health, getting metabolically healthy, you're not going to have to worry about, I mean, yes, you'll be exposed to the virus at one point. And the idea is to be exposed, get over it, and continue on with life.
Which is what most people have done, by the way. That's another missing story in the pandemic. Most people have been exposed and had very little happen to them. So that's the dirty little secret that they haven't really talked about. They think if you get it, oh my God, your health's going to come to an end. It's, oh my gosh, you're going to die. And it's like, no, like it's been so overblown, or I guess underreported, that those people that have been exposed had minor things. Now they have antibodies. Like, they're good. They didn't really have the doom and gloom that the media does portray it as.
Yeah, the media just did us a complete disservice.
But they got it from the top down, Brian. Like, if Dr. Fauci and Dr. Binks and all the ones on down had just said, you know what, it's horrible, we have this pandemic, we have this virus out there, you can do something today. Get out in the sun, breathe some air, get in some movement, meditate so you don't get stressed out by the isolation, eat real food, get nutrient density in your vitamin supplementation if you need that. Like, so easy. How hard would that have been? And in the meantime, that will get you healthier while we're waiting on therapeutics and the jab in the arm.
Exactly. That's something that unfortunately didn't happen. I hope that I'm not sure if it ever will happen. And I that goes back to what we talked about before about you have sponsored programs, and you watch whatever news outlet you watch, the commercials about Kellogg's, or the commercials about fruit roll-ups, and those people are funding, sponsoring the show, and it's a big problem that I don't know if it'll ever be fixed. I hope it does. I'm trying to help get that fixed.
And this is why I do my work so passionately, but we have powerful forces, big pharma, big food, big government, like all of these forces. It's a rotating kind of cast of characters, so to speak, that you have people in big food that end up in government. You have people in big pharma that end up in government, and then they just circle back and forth and back and forth. And then people wonder why organizations like the American Heart Association still vilify saturated fat and vilify red meat. Thankfully, American Diabetes Association is a little bit on board. They at least have a low carb option now for people, because the president of that organization is not bought and paid for, obviously, by the pharmaceutical companies, because they would shut that down if it was. So we're seeing little glimmers of hope. But what are you trying to accomplish? What is your ultimate goal, calling yourself the ketogenic pharmacist? What do you hope happens?
Well, you're absolutely right. I think that we took a step in the right direction with the president saying, hey, that there could be a low carb option, and I that's definitely a step in the right direction. But my goal as far as the ketogenic pharmacist, I want to help people improve I want to get people healthy. I want people to be not relying on their medications. I want them to realize that by eating real whole foods can really help with a lot of situations, not necessarily weight loss, but blood sugar, blood pressure, mental clarity, migraines, seizures, and it goes on and on and on. And there are a lot of different. I mean, it's a huge thing that can help with by eating real whole foods. I'm trying to help people get to that point, and I want to be I want to help them do that by, making recommendations to their doctors to get off these medications, as well as they are transitioning over to a ketogenic lifestyle. That's my passion. I mean, that's what I want to do. This is what I went to school for, is to help, and not necessarily give out drugs, which, yes, there are certain drugs that can help certain situations, but for the majority of the chronic disease states, a lot of this stuff can be treated with going back to the basics, what our ancestors used to do, by eating real whole foods, reducing stress, meditation, getting the sunlight, having a regular sleep schedule.
Yeah, all of those things that's used to be like normal, like what we always did, until kind of pharmaceutical companies went, ooh, let's make up a disease. Oh, let's make up a drug that cures that disease. Ooh, very eloquent. Aren't we awesome? Like the statin drugs, they hit the jackpot, because they identified something that wasn't a problem until they identified it as a problem. Then they created a drug that seemed to, quote, solve the problem, but didn't solve the underlying problem of cardiovascular disease. And they made a whole lot of money off of it, convincing doctors that this was the answer.
Yeah, and also too, taking a step further from the statins, I mean, there's a new class of medications. I'm sure you probably, the PCSK9 inhibitors.
Yes.
Yeah. And these are I mean, yes, there is a minute population that this would be beneficial for, with the familiar hypercholesterolemia, but there are a lot of people that the doctor's like, okay, well, I really want that LDL to be below 70. You're at 83, and let's try this PCSK9. Oh, what are we doing? So, I mean, it's just between the statins and now these new PCSK, and they're not cheap, by the way, these PCSK9 inhibitors. They're not cheap at all. That's it's a lot of money, and here we go again. And it's okay. So we did the whole statin, so let's do something else that, again, will fund the drug company, and it's not good.
The problem is the statins are now the business model, Brian. Oh, look, we struck gold with that. What did we do? Let's analyze it. Let's break it down, and now let's apply it to some other part of people's health. And they're probably going to target diabetes, since there's so many people with diabetes. The ironic thing is, some of the biggest selling drugs is to fight cardiovascular disease. What is the #1 killer in America? cardiovascular disease. Like heart disease kills more women and men than just about anything else in this country. It's like that, if that's not an indictment on the failure of statin medications, I don't know what is.
Exactly. We're looking at, we're not looking at the problem at all. I mean, we're focusing on, you know, it's funny. I growing up, I had a cat, and the cat would be looking on us outdoors, like we had a screen, and the cat would be focused on one little bug that was on the screen. There could be an explosion happening in our backyard, but that cat was focused on that one little bug.
Right.
And I kind of feel like that's what we're doing right now with this, chasing this LDL, marker, which is a marker, and we can't be looking at a marker. We got to be looking at the whole picture, which we're not doing.
Well, and the dirty secret about that marker is it's not even a directly measured marker. So I mentioned quite often in my work how it's a very highly volatile marker, especially for people who eat keto. It can be highly inaccurate. And so we're basing medication that doesn't come without its side effects. Like I was on both Lipitor and Crestor at one time in my life before I went keto, before I went low carb. And I had bad muscle aches and pains throughout my whole body. I remember playing a pickup game of basketball, going up for a rebound. I was on Lipitor at the time, going up for a rebound. And this thumb just went, and just went backwards. And I was like, oh my God. I went to the emergency room, and to that ER doctor's credit, he said, you take a statin, don't you? You take like Lipitor. I was like, how do you know that? He's like, we're seeing a lot of injuries because of the damage that these things are doing. I'm thinking, first do no harm. Like, how do you allow that to happen and not speak up and speak out? But again, the American Medical Association and all these entities are very powerful at keeping doctors quiet.
Absolutely. And, the doctors have metrics too. I mean, I told you about our metrics. The doctors have metrics. And my doctor right now, he's definitely, and it's unfortunate, but he hasn't bought into, eating whole foods, real foods. I had my cholesterol numbers done, my most recent physical. My HDL was in the 90s. My triglycerides, yeah, thank you. And my triglycerides were in the 40s.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what you want to see. But my LDL was, I don't know, it's like 200 something.
Right.
I don't know what it was, but he kept asking me. He's like, are you sure? I think it's a good idea for you to be on a statin. I'm like, what do you, and the thing is, like, I'm sure that the bosses that are employing him is like, okay, you have a patient who has an LDL of 200. He must be on a statin. And unfortunately that he that's what he's looking at. And and again, I tried to educate him, but he's the doctor.
Yeah. At some point, that LDL and total cholesterol story is going to have to break. I think it's shown to be a miserable failure time and time again. I was on a Clubhouse room just last night with a bunch of doctors. They invited me up to talk because I know a little bit about cholesterol. And one of the doctors mentioned there's this new kind of website where you can put in not just LDL, but like all of your numbers, including like family history of things and and it spits out a low risk, moderate risk, higher risk, and your need for statin or not having statin. I think that's kind of a cool, at least barometer. But the biggest barometer is when a doctor's looking at a patient. Do they look generally healthy? Do they sound healthy? Are they doing healthy habits? Like, to me, if someone's generally healthy and just because a marker on a panel happens to be out of range of what you think it should be, are we really basing medication on that?
Boy, no kidding. I mean, there's no, we need to triangulate a lot of all the numbers have to be played. It has to be going into play here, not just necessarily LDL. I mean, we need to look at,
Yes.
HSCRP and all the inflammatory markers, and we need to look at the ratios between the triglycerides and the HDL and the total overreach. We have to look at all that, and by focusing on one element, It's not looking at the big picture. And my doctor is the one who's not looking at the big picture. I hate to say it, but he's not. I mean, he's looking at it as that one element, that one LDL, and not looking at. And by the way, just like HSCRP, for example. I mean, it's like what, 0.2 or whatever it is. I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, but and I kind of question him. I'm like, okay, we have a good number here. We've got a good ratio here. We've got another good, and you're focusing on LDL. He's like, well, that's what you need to do is have. I'm like, are you listening to yourself? Do you hear what you're saying? Do you understand what's going on? Again, it comes back to the whole Twilight Zone situation. I feel like that where everybody else is, looking different. You feel out of place, and
I mean, I respect why standard of care is there. I respect that whole process. You need parameters of when the patient exhibits X, you should do Y. I respect that. I just think it's flawed in what they put in Y. In Y, there should be kind of all right, if you suspect, here's kind of a list of things to go through before you drop right to that medication. And thankfully, they have added the extra step in there of not just assuming high cholesterol is a disease. It's not. Now they add in the element of, okay, let's look for actual signs of disease. They have to now look for, like a CT heart scan, look for actual signs of atherosclerotic plaque in there, calcium in there. And if they show that, then maybe you start having the statin drug.
right.
But
I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt. I was going to say too. You were talking about the CT scan and the CAC score, and it's funny because I wanted to make sure a validation to myself to make sure that what I'm doing is right. So I said to my doctor, I'm like, can you order me a CAC score? And he's like, yeah, I guess. He didn't. I'm not sure if I'm sure he's probably, yeah, exactly. I'm sure he probably had ordered one before, but he didn't, I got the scan, and to be honest with you, I was, this is kind of near the beginning. I'm like, I don't know if this is, of course it was a 0, big fat 0.
Yeah.
And I said to my doctor, okay, so, here we have another metric that shows that I am in good health, and we're still focusing on this. But it's one of those things where I wish that, I think the CAC score, I think that's starting to become a little bit more common, which is excellent because this has a real-time picture of what's going on in your heart in terms of the calcium, calcium plaques that are building up. I mean, that's something that's super valuable. And the work by Ivor Cummins really got me interested in that whole CAC score. So.
Yes, and there was a documentary called Widowmaker, all about that as well. Go look that up.
Yeah.
One of the platforms, Netflix, something like that has it. So go look that up. But Brian, dude, wow, the work you are doing now as a pharmacist, it takes a lot of guts because a lot of what you're talking about is kind of shining a bright light on your industry. And I know you're ready for it. You and I have had many discussions. You're like, I'm tired of the lie. I'm tired of the fallacy that health is found in a pill. It's not. It's found in food with the help of medication strategically placed for some people. But the vast majority of people on these, quote, maintenance drugs, which we talked about earlier, they don't even be on them. And so kudos to you for changing. Guys, he is the Ketogenic Pharmacist over on Instagram. Did you make theketogenicpharmacist.com?
Yes, that is correct. TheKetogenicPharmacist.com, and Jimmy, you hit the nail right on the head. Thank you for everything you've been doing. Thank you for, connecting with me, and thank you for having me on your show. I mean, I'm forever grateful.
Thank you, man. You're doing great work. And as always, anything I can do to help you out, just let me know.
Okay.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.